Hello and welcome back. Today we will be racking and bottling the lemon blueberry cider. So we are going to need a vessel to rack that into. We are going to need a hydrometer to check our final gravity and a autosiphon. And because we used a bag, we will be able to remove the blueberries and put them into a colander over a bowl, which is going to make cleanup a whole lot easier. So we are going to pull that bag out gently to try and not stir up the lees at the bottom, although this is going to sit for a little bit, so it's not a huge issue. It's just going to make the second racking easier. Then we set that in the bowl, and we set that aside. Now we are going to check our gravity reading just to see how far the yeast have gone, see if this needs to sit for a little bit longer, and get an approximation on what our alcohol content is. This came out to a 0.96, which I believe puts the alcohol percentage right around 6 to 6.5%. I don't remember what the original is right now, but it was 6 to 6.5%. This did finish very dry as well. Third time's the charm on that gravity reading there. Genius. Take a note real quick, just so we can remember that later. And then we are going to get to racking. I'm going to pour off a sample here so I can taste it and see if it needs any adjustments. But I will do that after we rack. So to rack, we are going to use the autosiphon. They are a very good investment. I highly recommend it if you're going to get into this. They're not that expensive. You can get them on Amazon, or preferably, if you have one, your local craft brewing store. I do have one here, and I like to get as much as I can from them. So we're just going to get that going. Careful not to let it go all the way to the bottom. And then we are going to pour the rest of our test sample back in. Everything here was sanitized. My sanitizer of choice is Star San. It was mixed with water to the manufacturer's recommendation. You can see that there's still some foam from that in the carboy, so we're just going to dump the rest of that in there. Put a bung with a airlock into that carboy. And that is going to sit for a little bit while I taste this and think about what needs to be done to it. It isn't really clear at this point, still very hazy. And I think I used too much lemon peel. This does smell a little bit like a cleaning agent. The blueberry is almost entirely lost, mostly because of the lack of sweetness, but also because of that overpowering lemon. It's less like lemonade and more like lemon-scented cleaner, so not great. So, back a couple days later, we are going to re-rack it on some thawed blueberries. These were frozen. This is 1 pound of blueberries, which are going to go into a bag as well, once again to make cleanup easier. This should bring back some of that blueberry flavor. Fermenting on whole fruit will give you the essence of a fruit. Aging on fruit will give you that fruit flavor a lot more so. So we are just going to go ahead and, first off, forget to tie off the bag. Then remember to tie off the bag. There you go. Just going to give that a twist, tie the bag off, and then we will commence with the racking. Again, the source is higher up than the destination. get it flowing, and then because this only sat for a little while, not too much has settled out. So we're just going to put on that lid. This is, again, my wide mouth, little big mouth bubbler from Northern Brewers. I believe that is the only place you can get these right now. And this has sat on the blueberries for 3 weeks, I believe. I let that sit, checking it every once in a while to make sure nothing was growing. This was still off-gassing quite a bit, so you shouldn't get anything growing on it. You're going to get a nice blanket of CO2 in there, so you shouldn't get any mold growth or anything inside your carboy. So we're just going to take off that lid. Hair's looking a little wild there, boy. On the smell, the first thing you notice is it still does smell strongly of lemon cleaner. The blueberry smell is definitely back. Letting it sit on whole blueberries after fermentation is definitely made an improvement. I'm just going to take a quick gravity reading to see, first off, if any sugar was added. If it doesn't look like any sugar was added, that means your yeast are still active, because there are going to be sugars coming out of those blueberries. And my yeast looks like it's done. We did get 6 points of sugar added in from the blueberries, so it came out to 1.002 is the reading on it right now. So we did get some sugars come out of those blueberries, so it looks like the yeast that I used went completely dormant or just died. And I am going to carbonate, so I've got a scale here, a cup for mixing in some primer yeast and sugar. I'm just going to take another sample to see how much of a difference we got in the flavor. It also did clear quite a bit sitting in those 3 weeks. It's actually a very nice, dark, rich, reddish purple color, which is lovely. The blueberry flavor did come back. It definitely benefited from that, but there is still that strong, almost overpowering lemon flavor, which hopefully will age out, but I will probably drink this before it has a chance to. I'm just going to pour some of that into that cup for mixing our primer yeast and sugar. And I am using a wine yeast for my primer yeast. This package was vacuum sealed, so it didn't matter how much I tapped it, the yeast wouldn't move. So I'm just going to cut the corner, let some air in, and that's going to make this process a lot less messy. Can be able to get that yeast down to the bottom. And you don't need a lot for this. I've used this package a couple times now for priming brews, because you really only need like half a teaspoon. But you are going to have to let this sit. Those granules will break down and really mix into that liquid over time, but it takes probably 10 minutes for it to do that. Give it a quick mix to let those yeast start to hydrate. And then we're going to get to racking. Once again, we have a bag of whole fruit, so we're going to drain that in a colander over a bowl. Pull that out carefully as to not disturb your sediment at the bottom, your yeast cake. And then we will get to racking. The battery on my camera died, so I didn't get to... It didn't record it, but I did rack this back into that wide mouth just to make the next step a lot easier. But it was just racking it, so it isn't something I would have shown anyway. Now we're going to measure out our priming sugar for carbonation. Generally speaking, you want about 28 grams of sugar per gallon. This does have some sugar in it from the blueberries. I didn't care to take the time to calculate how much sugar is actually in there. So I'm just going to reduce the amount I use by a little bit. I'm going to go 26 grams of sugar. This is just plain white sugar. And then we're going to mix that in there. Stir until it is completely dissolved so you don't get any errant granules of sugar in your last few bottles. That could cause problems with carbonation in that it overcarbonates and explodes. So I stirred that in good, just making sure nothing settled out. And we're going to go ahead and pour that in. And that was enough time for that yeast to really hydrate and to dissolve into the liquid. And then we're just going to stir that up, making sure everything is well incorporated and homogeneous. So you've got an even distribution of that yeast and sugar throughout your bottles. And once you're confident that you've gotten that well mixed in, we can begin bottling. And this is why you set it over a colander in a bowl, because there was a few ounces that drained out in that period of time. Something you maybe don't want to lose, but not a huge deal. And then we will set up for bottling. For bottling, you're going to want a bottling wand. This is going to make the process a lot less messy, rather. There is a spring-loaded valve. I didn't know there was two there, did you? There's a spring-loaded valve at the bottom there that when you push down on it, it allows liquid to flow, and when you lift it off, it closes that valve and makes the flow stop, which means you're not going to get you don't have to pinch the tube or anything or rely on anything like that when you're transferring the nozzle from one bottle to the next. Just makes it a lot easier. However, it makes starting this a lot trickier without a third hand. You have to push down on that valve while you're starting your auto siphon. After that, it's pretty simple. This was racked, so there's no sediment at the bottom, so you can just let it sit there. I got 8 bottles. They are filled. Let me see. Make sure that number is correct. I got 8 there. These were filled almost all the way up. You do have to account for the volume taken up by the auto siphon, but you don't want to leave too much space in there, otherwise your bottles will overpressurize. If you did follow along and make this, let me know how it turns out. If you got that overpowering like lemon cleaner scent as well. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.